Hi, I'm Jay Metter, CFP, and today I'm interviewing my friend and attorney, Chris Peterson. Chris is a local expert in estate planning. He's a member of the National Institute of Certified Estate Planners, the National Association of Estate Planners and Counsels, and State Bar of Texas Real Estate, Trust, and Probate Section. He graduated from that law school in Austin, which I refuse to mention by name. He's been in practice for 18 years, and last year he wrote 93 estate plans. There are two reasons that we're doing this interview today. The first is we wanted an expert to share some insights with us, but the second is so that you will understand that our job as a CFP is not to fix a client's estate problems. It's merely to see if we see anything that might be a problem with the estate, and then make sure that we work with that client and their attorney in helping them expedite fixing the problem. But it's them fixing the problem, not us. And what Chris is going to talk about today are some real-world situations and experiences that he's dealt with and that you'll probably see someday. So, Chris, just to sort of get this thing going, I've had a lot of people come into me and say, well, I really don't have that much, so do I even have an estate?
Yeah, and we get that one all the time in the office too. People are kind of funny about knowing whether or not they think that the only way that you can have an estate is if you have, $20 million or something like that, but that's really not true. Almost everybody has an estate, so the answer is always yes when somebody asks you that question. Do I have an estate? Yes, you have an estate. If you own something, if you have a bank account, if you own clothing or furniture, then you have an estate.
Okay. Well, so what is an estate?
Well, the textbook defines it as all the real or personal property that you own or that you have an interest in, no matter what it's worth and no matter where it is located.
Okay. What makes up an estate?
So basically your estate is just all of your assets. And so again, that's going to be everything that you own or anything that you have an interest in. So it's going to be real estate, if you have cars, if you have bank accounts, if you have life insurance policies, if you have retirement or investment accounts. Anything that you own is going to make up your estate. The thing that people don't think about oftentimes is your household furnishings, your whatever personal property, grandmother's china that's sitting in the china cabinet, all of those things, your car, boat, RV, everything you own makes up your estate.
Okay. What is estate planning?
So basically estate planning is just a systematic way to deal with your estate. So what you want to do is identify everything that you own, identify everything that you have an interest in, and you're gonna have a comprehensive plan for how to deal with those things, both while you're living and then after you pass away.
What is the goal of estate planning?
Well, this is going to vary for each individual client. So the key thing, I think, when talking about estate planning is you need to listen to your client. You need to understand, there's sort of normal goals that most people have, but at the end of the day, the estate plan is really about identifying what your client's goals are and addressing those concerns. So some of the most common ones that we see is, of course, most people, they have loved ones that they want to inherit their stuff after they're gone, and so they want to identify who they want to inherit their property. Most people would prefer to preserve as much of their estate as possible to pass on to those loved ones. So a lot of estate planning is about asset preservation and protection. Most people would rather be in control of their assets for their entire lifetime. So it's about how do you pass things to loved ones but also retain the level of control over the assets that you want. And sometimes that's even control after death.
Yeah.
So sometimes trust that you have for your kids, you'll want to control how that money is spent or when the children will receive it, because you may not want them to receive it when they're 18. Typically, people will want to pay as little in taxes, fees, probate costs as they can possibly pay. And so essentially what they would rather do is they would rather pay their beneficiaries that money than pay it to the probate court or to Uncle Sam or even to the probate attorney. Although I'm all in favor of paying attorneys.
Of course.
And then another key goal of estate planning, since part of estate planning is really also planning for disability or incapacity, is planning for who is going to control and how they're going to control your assets when you're incapacitated or disabled, when you can't control them for yourselves. So those are kind of the major goals that we see most of the time in the office for estate plans.
Right. What's the role of the attorney in all of this?
So the role of the attorney is really, there's really a couple. Obviously, the attorney is going to be the one that actually drafts the documents. So when we talk about estate planning or disability planning documents, the attorney is the one that drafts those documents. The attorney is one who's actually going to advise the client about what type of document that they need. Do they need a certain type of will? Do they need a revocable trust? Would an irrevocable trust be better? Those are really things for the realm of the attorney. Typically, the attorney will oversee the actual signing of the documents. In order to have a valid will or a valid trust, there's certain formalities that have to be followed. And so the attorney's job is to make sure that those formalities are followed so that the will is valid or the trust is valid. I think part of the role of the attorney, although some may disagree with me, is to make sure that if you have a trust, that the trust gets funded. I know we're going to talk about that at some point later, but one of the problems we see all the time in the office is that trusts are well drafted but have nothing in them. The trust owns nothing. They're not funded. And so I think one of the roles of the attorney is to make sure that the trust gets funded. And so that really encompasses what the attorney's duties are.
Excellent. Well, so what do you see as the role of the CFP in all of this?
So the key role for the certified financial planner is to gather information and to assist the attorney in whatever, and the client in whatever way possible to make sure that the estate plan is right. You guys aren't going to believe this, but oftentimes people will come in to meet with me. They've never met with me before, but they have a relationship with you. Mm-hmm. They don't tell me everything. They leave stuff out. I've had clients that, oops, I forgot to tell you about the $1 million life insurance policy. Oops, I failed to mention that I'm inheriting $10 million from my mother. Whereas the financial planner usually has a longer term relationship with that client and they know that information. So as much information gathering and then assistance to the attorney in what those assets are and how they're structured, I really see that as being the key role. One other thing that I think is really helpful that the CFPs can do is a lot of estate planning has to do with beneficiary designations. And so the CFP is going to be the frontline person on obtaining beneficiary designation forms and either getting those to the attorney or assisting the client in filling those forms out correctly. The one thing that CFPs can't do is they really can't advise a client about which particular planning option is best for them, and they can't produce the documents.
Right.
If you get into those two things, you're going to get into that.
It's practicing law.
It is,
right.
And so you're going to get into that whole unauthorized practice of law issue. So what you want to do is, if you are relating your personal experiences or what experiences that you've seen of clients about what types of plans have worked for them, that's not practicing law. You're just relating personal experiences.
Right.
If you start advising clients about, well, you definitely need this versus this, then that gets into the actual practice of law.
Right.
The other thing that I do think is interesting is, it's perfectly fine for CFPs to give estate planning seminars because you're giving general information. And so if you're using that as a client development tool, you really don't have to worry about that as practicing law.
Right. Our job is to spot red flags and then once we've spotted those red flags, it's not to give advice at that point. It is simply to say, hey, look, we probably need to speak with your attorney about this. And first of all, do you have an attorney? And if you don't, then I've got a list, here that I can certainly give you, and then you can sort of interview these attorneys. And then the second thing that is crucial is that once they have established who their attorney is going to be, that we ask permission to be able to speak with that attorney openly about their situation. It will save them a ton of time, and that way the attorney and the CFP can get together and hit anything that might have been missed in that attorney conference that the attorney needs to know about. And it is so crucial. You need to do the same thing with CPAs, and if you're not an insurance expert, you need to do the same thing with their insurance expert. Our job is to be a coach of their estate plan, but we are not practicing attorneys, so we need to make absolutely sure that we let the attorney do his job or her job, but we're simply there to say, hey, these are some things I've spotted, what should the client do about this? And that's it. Oh, go ahead.
And what you're going to see from the best estate planning attorneys is you're going to see someone that will coordinate with the financial planners because they understand how important it is. They're going to be somebody that wants a team approach so that they get the best result for their client. So if that's how you spot the good estate planning attorneys, or that's one of the ways you spot the good estate planning attorneys. So I think one of the things that you can do sort of proactively in your practice, and Jay, I know you've done this many times, is go out and visit with attorneys in your local area that do estate planning and get to know them and see what they're like and see what their approach is, because they're going to need you and you're going to need them.
Right, and you're the front line on this list, and so you better make sure that you qualify that list really well. Obviously, Chris's name is number one on my list.